Hey, just so we're all on the same page, Vaporwave is this, and this, and this. It is an art style and aesthetic that has become pretty popular in the past 20 years. It banks on 80s and 90s nostalgia using images and techniques from the time. Although with the techniques, that's not really the case. We'll get back to those. I bet you already know Vaporwave, but in case you don't, the themes that it usually touches on are consumerism, liminal spaces, the digital world, and that area between the real and the unreal. It's pretty fun because it harkens back to an era when tech was very different. It was a lot more this and a lot less this. Yuck. I think a good analogy is that back then the internet was like alchemy, and now it's like chemistry, if that makes sense. It's a very nerdy style, very self-aware, very ironic. Example, if you know anything about Vaporwave, you've seen this and heard this. This was made by an artist from the US, but all of the tracks in the album and the album itself are titled in Japanese. It was made for the Western market, but it does appeal to people who are interested in that sort of thing, which back then was even more niche than it is now. This is one of the key aspects of the aesthetic of Vaporwave. It appropriates cultural signifiers from a different era and a different place to give it an air of like a found object, you know? It could be haunted, it could be made for someone else, but somehow it made its way to your hands. At least this was the case for early Vaporwave. This is something also seen in the techniques of Vaporwave, and one of the main ones is sampling. Something seen in two ways, mostly. Visual and audio. Audio and visual. Can't see me, invisible. So to quickly explain sampling, it is removing something from someone else's work, simplifying it, and then putting it in a new setting, giving it a new context. Feel like there's a word for that. Let's talk a bit more about sampling, but we're gonna put Vaporwave to the side for a second, and let's talk about another nerdy thing from the internet that's kind of similar. Steampunk. What are these names? Vaporwave, Steampunk, you nerd. So steampunk also does a lot of sampling, but it does so in a different way, on a more conceptual level. So to boil it down, in steampunk what usually happens is that someone takes an idea, they make it simple, and then they put it in a different era, in a different time, and most importantly with a different aesthetic. It's a weird thing, a mix of aesthetics, a bit of both, but neither here nor there. It is not faithful to either setting or aesthetic principles, but instead a distilled substance from both. So now that we're talking about all of this, let's throw one more into the mix. Retrofuturism. You'll see why in a second, just bear with me. Retrofuturism is an aesthetic exercise. It is the future as envisioned by the past. It's not an intellectual thing at all, and it's not even trying to be. Instead, it's pure aesthetics, relying on cultural signifiers to create meaning within you. There are usually two types of retrofuturism. Artifacts found in the past that try to depict the future, and the genre, which is things made now trying to emulate what they thought back then. I hope this makes sense. I hope you're still with me. So the retrofuturist genre, that being things made nowadays, call upon a memory kingdom. A consensus of what we think things used to feel like and be like. A representation, not a recreation. Why do I talk about these things? Come on now. This video is all over the place, but honestly that's where I thrive. So I'm gonna throw one more curveball at you. Let's put a pin on everything we've talked about and talk about something that seems fully irrelevant, but I promise it's not. I want to talk to you about art from the early 1900s, because of course I do. So in 1912, Picasso made this.
What am I looking at here exactly?
And this image is notorious because of this. What Picasso did was take a picture of a chair from a catalog and paste it within his painting. I'm not gonna say this was the very first time, but it's an early case of sampling. Obviously, Picasso, being this little socialite that he was, spread his ideas around, and soon enough other artists were using it, the technique developed, and eventually we would get to know ready-made art. This is art that takes objects from the world and gives it new context, usually just by placing it from a different angle or a different style or whatever, without too much intervention of the object itself. The point is to highlight the object as a piece of art. To put it simply, this type of art is an imitation and a recreation of life. Cool, fast forward a whole lot and let's go to Britain. Tracy Emin, Damien Hirst. You can see how these techniques and styles and ideas have developed into their own thing, and you can say what you want about this piece of art. Personally, I like it, but its whole thing is that it uses things from real life and it gives them new context. It's pretty interesting. Is it this interesting? I don't know, but I think it's kind of cool. Artists take these objects to create a sort of window to a different time and a different space, oftentimes an imaginary one. A purposeful temporal disjunction. Does that remind you of Vaporwave? A little bit? A tiny bit, maybe? So let me paraphrase these guys a little bit. Ghosts arrive from the past and appear in the present. However, the ghost cannot be properly said to belong to the past. Does the ghost belong to the present, then? Surely not. The idea of returning from death breaks all traditional concepts of time. What you can do is simplify things and remix them. Vaporwave artists use outdated aesthetics with modern techniques to create something isolated from setting, a time out of joint, banking on nostalgia, appealing to when you thought the future would be different, more simple, more hopeful. Okay, Miss Singh, calm down, okay? Calm down. On one hand, yes, people who live submerged in nostalgia are probably getting in the way of their own happiness. You can't bring back a ghost, and you can't bring back a time that you don't genuinely understand. And if you did live it firsthand, you probably wouldn't want it back. But that doesn't mean you have to let go of the happiness that it brought, especially if you enjoy it ironically. Yes, it's looking at life through rose-tinted glasses and everything looks nicer like this. I mean, even the mess in my kitchen looks better with these on. So I guess the moral of the story is that it's okay to indulge in nostalgia so long as you don't drown in it. And if you're smart about it, there's so much stuff in these memory kingdoms that you can bring back to make the present even cooler. And as Vaporwave has become more elaborate, it has grown its own identity, drawing less and less from the actual past and instead settling into its own socially constructed memory kingdom. You might as well enjoy the past, because it's not going anywhere. Hey, we're done! This video was inspired by this game I've been playing called Live a Life. My favorite story is the fighter one, surprising absolutely no one. So yeah, let me know any Vaporwave things you enjoy, because even now the genre is full of these hidden treasures. I'm working on several videos on a whole bunch of things and I can't wait to share them with you, so subscribe, hang around, it's gonna be fun. Alright.